In 2013, American cinema presented viewers with an unusual film based on true events. Despite its modest budget and lack of star power, the movie attracted significant attention even before its release. This was mainly because its protagonists, real people, were making every effort to prevent it from appearing in theaters. The story begins in November 2004 and follows the lives of Peter and Joan Porco, who were 52 and 54 years old at that time. They represented a typical American middle-class family living in a two-story house in the small town of Del Mar. In this community of just 8,000 people, almost everyone knew each other. Peter worked at the appellate court, while his wife Joan was a speech therapist. They had been married for over 30 years and had 2 adult sons. The older son, 23-year-old Jonathan, served as a junior officer in the U.S. Navy, while the younger son, 21-year-old Christopher Porco, was studying at the University of Rochester, located a 3-hour drive from his parents' home. Monday, November 15, 2004, began like any ordinary day. After waking to his alarm clock, Peter started his usual morning routine. Getting out of bed, he headed to the bathroom where, as usual, he shaved and brushed his teeth. Then he put on his business suit and went downstairs. After turning on the coffee machine, he decided to load the dirty dishes into the dishwasher while his coffee was brewing. Afterward, Peter stepped outside to get the morning newspaper, but he was so clumsy that the front door closed behind him. For such occasions, a spare house key was kept in a flower pot by the doorstep. Peter retrieved it and, newspaper in hand, returned inside. He sat at the table and enjoyed a cup of coffee, then stood up and was about to head to work. But this morning was drastically different from normal ones. Peter only took a couple of steps before collapsing to the floor. The reason was that just a few hours earlier, he had received 16 strikes to the head with an axe, and all those morning activities Peter had been performing while losing significant amounts of blood. At work, Peter Porco was known for his exceptional punctuality, so when the workday had already begun and Peter hadn't shown up, his colleagues realized something serious must have happened. Naturally, no one answered phone calls to the Porco residence either. One of the security guards working at the court building was sent to Peter's house. The front door to the Porco family home remained unlocked after Peter had opened it with the second key, so the guard entered without any difficulty. There he witnessed a horrific scene of violence, with Peter Porco at its center. However, he wasn't the only victim in this incident. On the upper floor, in the bedroom, his wife Joan was discovered, also having lost a lot of blood. The law enforcement representatives who arrived didn't need much time to find the weapon used in the attack. It turned out to be a massive fire axe, located near Joan Porco. Unlike her husband, she received only 3 axe strikes to the head. Peter, as mentioned earlier, was the victim of 16 similar strikes. But the most astonishing fact was that his passing wasn't immediate. As incredible as it sounds, with such severe injuries, Peter continued his regular morning routine for some time, unaware that he had suffered life-ending wounds. Damage to Peter's upper brain cortex, specifically the neocortex responsible for conscious thinking, became the key factor in what happened. Meanwhile, the lower parts of his brain remained almost untouched. This part of the brain controls habitual, automatic human actions. As a result, Peter, unaware of what was happening, acted as if on autopilot until his passing from blood loss. The story takes an even more dramatic turn, considering the fact that Joan, despite 3 axe strikes to her head, remained alive until law enforcement arrived. She was urgently transported to the hospital, while police began their investigation. The robbery theory was rejected almost immediately, since all valuables remained untouched. The nature of the wounds indicated that the main target of the attacker was specifically Peter, while his wife likely became an incidental victim. It's important to note that Peter worked in the court system. The nature of his professional activities inevitably led to many people being unhappy with court decisions. The list of potential persons of interest was quite extensive, so investigators began by checking the most obvious leads. In particular, they discovered that shortly before the tragedy, Peter Porco had received threats from a person who had lost parental rights through a court decision. This person openly declared his intention to get even with both the judge and the court clerk, Peter Porco. This lead turned out to be false. The person who threatened Peter had an undeniable alibi at the time the crime occurred. Nevertheless, investigators had other theories. 10 days before the attack on the Porco family, on November 5, a similar crime happened in neighboring Bethlehem. There, they found the body of 28-year-old Timothy Gray, who passed away from multiple axe strikes on the lawn of his own home. Initially, law enforcement didn't see a connection between these incidents. The situation dramatically changed on November 25, when the local newspaper received an anonymous message. The letter stated, "Taking Timothy Gray's life was just a rehearsal. My real target was Peter Porco, and his wife Joan was an extra bonus. I needed practice, and Timothy served as the perfect subject for this. He was easy prey. I tracked him in his backyard on the 5th, waiting for a moment when he would be alone. I expected difficulties with Peter Porco but was wrong in my prediction. On the evening of November 14th, I was across from their house, continuously smoking. At some point, Peter noticed me through the window. In response to my greeting gesture, he came down and opened the front door. He demanded an explanation for my presence and threatened to call the police if I didn't leave his property. These words triggered my attack. I managed to rush inside before he closed the door. Once in the house, I began striking with the axe, ignoring his pleas for mercy. I intentionally don't reveal the motives for my actions to maintain suspense. Now I'm looking for my next victim. Catch me if you can." The unknown sender was extremely careful. No fingerprints or any other clues that could lead investigators to their trail were found on the letter. Particularly concerning was the fact that the perpetrator's future actions remained unpredictable. Investigators had certain doubts about the authenticity of the message received, since there was truly no obvious connection between the victims, Timothy Gray and Peter Porco. If you enjoyed this video, please support my channel by subscribing and hit the bell icon to never miss my next video. However, there was another critically important aspect of the investigation. Before Joan Porco was rushed to the hospital, she managed to say just one name to the detective. It was the name of Christopher Porco, her younger son. When police arrived at the scene, they found that the front door wasn't broken into, which immediately raised suspicions. Despite severe head injuries, Joan was still conscious. When the detective asked if the attacker was a family member, she nodded yes. When specifically asked about Christopher, she nodded again, after which the victim was urgently taken to the hospital. That same day, investigators questioned Christopher and examined his yellow Jeep but found nothing suspicious. The young man claimed he had spent the entire night in his dorm at the University of Rochester. His statement was supported by the absence of transponder records on the toll road between Rochester and Del Mar, suggesting the car hadn't left the college campus. After 3 weeks of treatment, Joan, whose face was now scarred, unexpectedly began actively defending her son. She firmly denied ever pointing to him as a suspect. Moreover, the woman even purchased advertising space in the local newspaper to publicly declare Christopher's innocence. In her statement, she wrote, "I am completely confident that my son had nothing to do with this terrible incident. I ask law enforcement to stop pursuing him and focus on finding the real person who took my husband Peter's life." Given the seriousness of her head injuries, there was a possibility that Joan's initial statements were given while her mind was clouded and couldn't be considered reliable evidence in court. Nevertheless, they provided investigators with an important direction for further investigation. Despite the mother's statements about her son's innocence, investigators continued to consider Christopher as one of the main suspects. A key clue was the deactivation of the home security system, which was done using the correct access code. The perpetrator tried to cover their tracks by damaging the control panel, but specialists were able to recover this data. Special attention was drawn to the perfect timeline of events that night. Security cameras recorded a yellow Jeep leaving the university parking lot at 10:30 p.m. Considering that the journey from Rochester to the Porco family home took about 3 hours, the timestamps matched perfectly. At 2:14 a.m. the alarm was disabled, by 5 a.m. the phone lines were cut, and at 8:30 a.m. the yellow Jeep returned to Rochester. Of course, just matching the color of the vehicle wasn't enough for charges. However, a forensic expert, carefully studying the camera footage, discovered distinctive features of the vehicle: a mud spot on the front passenger window, a university parking sticker on the right rear door, and a distinctive decal on the spare tire. All these details matched Christopher's Jeep exactly. As for the absence of transponder registration at toll points, there was a logical explanation. The device could have been deliberately removed from the windshield, and passage paid in cash. During the suspected travel time, only 12 such transactions were recorded. When examining trash containers at the toll booth, all these tickets were found. One of the discovered tickets contained Christopher Porco's DNA in the form of sweat and oil fingerprints, which became significant evidence in the case. Additional confirmation of Christopher's involvement came from a recording of his call to the 911 emergency service. According to him, he was informed about the attack on his parents by a local journalist, and he was calling to verify this information.
That's on Police Dispatcher Saginaw.
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by the Times-Union saying that my parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information for me.
Hey, Chris, whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, are you in a dorm there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have a dorm name or?
It's called Monroe.
Okay. And you're hearing from the Times-Union?
Yeah, they called me and said my parents were found, I guess, dead. I don't know. They didn't say how or anything.
Let me try and find you somebody who may have some more information for you.
Okay. Now, as far as, when was the last time you said you came down and saw your parents?
About 3 weeks ago. It was on a weekend. I can't give you a date. I have to figure it out. I'm not really sure.
Okay, but about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Okay, and the email, what's going on with your email? You said you emailed him today, but you didn't get a response?
Yeah, I emailed him this afternoon. My dad at work.
Okay.
About college loan stuff.
Okay. You're going to go right to Albany Med?
I don't know. I don't even know where my mom is. But
yeah, she is at Albany Med.
Okay. Do you know her condition?
No, because I haven't talked to her. Let me give you my pager number.
Okay.
Because when you get there, I'll come and see if there's anything I can do for you.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
What was striking about this recording was that Christopher's voice remained completely calm. There wasn't the slightest sign of alarm or concern, which seemed unnatural for someone learning about a tragedy involving their parents. Christopher also had a strong motive for committing the crime. Shortly before the tragedy, he had forged his father's signature to obtain a loan. Upon discovering this, Peter sent his son a letter. "Chris, repeating such an act will force me to contact law enforcement. You need to come home for a serious talk. Your mother and I, despite being disappointed by your behavior, still love you and are concerned about your future." A few weeks before the tragedy, Christopher consulted with a financial specialist about the possibility of investing $1 million. The origin of such a large sum was simple. Peter and Joan's lives were insured for exactly this amount. All these facts came together to form a complete picture of the crime. The trial of Christopher Porco began on June 27, 2006, and lasted about 6 months. Throughout the proceedings, Joan Porco, despite the severe wounds left on her face by the attacker, continued to support her son, who, as it turned out, was the cause of her suffering. On December 12, 2006, the jury found Christopher Porco guilty, and the court sentenced him to 50 years in prison. The letter to the newspaper, supposedly written by the real attacker, was definitively attributed to Christopher himself by investigators. The choice of an axe as the weapon wasn't random. Christopher deliberately tried to connect his crime with another high-profile incident that happened 10 days earlier in a neighboring town. The Timothy Gray incident mentioned in the letter was committed by Eric Westervold due to a classic love triangle situation and had no connection to the tragedy in the Porco family. Christopher simply used this coincidence to confuse the investigation. The story received widespread public attention, and in 2013, a movie called Romeo Killer was made based on it. Despite the Porco family's attempts to prevent the film's release, the court rejected their petition to ban its showing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, Don't forget to hit the like button. If you didn't, feel free to give it a dislike. Make sure to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video.